Charles Dickens is considered by many to be one of our country's greatest novelists. But like many of the children in his books, his early life was difficult and unhappy. He was born in Portsmouth in 1812 to a lower middle-class family. His father was a navy clerk, but when Dickens was 12, his father was thrown into debtor's prison at Marshalsea. Poor Charles was sent to work here at Warren's blacking factory on the banks of the Thames to help pay back the family debt. He had to walk 4 hours to work, and he described the factory like this. It was a crazy, tumble-down old house, abutting, of course, on the river, and literally overrun with rats. His time in this place, with its rotten floors and staircase, its cellars, the dirt and the squeaking rats, inspired him to write David Copperfield. Dickens left Warren's factory and became an office boy for a law firm in Temple. Dickens often wrote about the workings of the law courts. Tom Pinch in Martin Chuzzlewit worked here in Pump Court at Temple. Dickens describes him as passing from the roar and rattle of the streets into the quiet courtyards of the Temple. Also, here in Fleet Street was his publisher's office. This area, the wide streets, the narrow alleys, feature in many of his novels. A Tale of Two Cities, Barnaby Rudge, Great Expectations, David Copperfield, Martin Chuzzlewit, Pickwick Papers, and Our Mutual Friend. Terry Cruncher, in A Tale of Two Cities, was a bank porter at Dickens' fictional Tellson's Bank, based on Charles Bank in Fleet Street. Jerry used to dig up recently buried bodies in the dead of night and sell them to doctors to use for dissection. He lived here, in Hanging Sword Alley, described by Dickens as not in a savoury neighbourhood. Soon Dickens' skill as a writer became noticed. He moved from the law firm to become a country reporter, and then in 1835 he became a reporter for debates in Parliament for the Morning Chronicle. He met his wife Catherine Hogarth at this time. She was the eldest daughter of the paper's music critic. 2 great themes of his novels were formed while he was here: how society dealt with the poor and how the government was run. The posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, better known as the Pickwick Papers, were serialised and were very successful. They were followed by his first and one of his greatest books, Oliver Twist, the life of a child, a victim of a brutal society who was sucked into a life of crime set here in the slums of Clerkenwell. In Oliver, he talks about how even the way people dress related to their place in society. Oliver Twist, when wrapped in his old yellow calico robes, was badgered and ticketed and fell into his place at once. A parish child, the orphan of a workhouse, the humble, half-starved drudge to be cuffed and buffeted through the world, despised by all and pitied by none. Dickens went on to have 10 children with his wife. Whoa! Dickens spent a lot of time wandering about these streets. In fact, he lived here at 48 Doughty Street in nearby Holborn in the 1830s. It was a crime-ridden, impoverished part of London. He writes vividly about the squalor and dirt found here. It's quite nice now. His next 2 books were Barnaby Rudge and The Old Curiosity Shop, which are in fact his least successful novels. This shop is now a shoe shop, but is said to have been the inspiration for the shop in the novel which Dickens describes as one of those receptacles for old and curious things which seem to crouch in odd corners of this town, and to hide their musty treasures from the public eye in jealousy and distrust. Dickens's mission to attack social problems was now unstoppable. In 1845 he travelled to America, where he fought to abolish slavery and published his American Notes, which attacked the evils of selfishness, hypocrisy, and financial speculation. He met with sensational success with the publication of A Christmas Carol, and followed this with more Christmas stories. In 1850, his next focus was the foggy world of lawyers. In Bleak House, people and their lawsuits are confused in a foggy mist which fills the book as it fills the real world of London. The book begins. Fog everywhere. Fog up the river where it flows among the green apes and meadows. Fog down the river where it rolls defiled along the tiers of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Fog on the Essex marshes. Fog on the Kentish heights. Fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs. Fog lying on the yards and hovering in the rigging of great ships. Fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats. In 1853, Dickens begins to read his work aloud to the public. 1 year later, he published his Hard Times, followed by Little Dorrit, which again draws on his father's experiences in debtor's prison. By now, of course, Dickens couldn't be more different from his father. He was famous and very, very wealthy. He could afford to buy Gad's Hill in Kent, a beautiful house he had admired from afar as a child, and where he and his family had very glamorous parties and theatrical performances. He even gave one to Queen Victoria. Here he wrote A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations. Miss Havisham would no doubt have lived in such a house, although a bit more cobwebby, of course. Here in Richmond is Maids of Honour Row, where Estella, of Dickens's Great Expectations, came to London to be introduced to aristocratic society by Mrs. Brandley. By now, Dickens was really famous and had become estranged from his wife and involved in an affair with a young actress called Ellen Ternan. She was 26 and he was 53. Many people say it was Ellen who was the inspiration for Estella in Great Expectations, but the sorrows and complications of hiding their relationship showed in the last two novels. Our Mutual Friend was written in 1864 and is about characters living lies. His last novel, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, was unfinished and was very, very odd. After an exhausting life, Dickens had in 1869 what was possibly a mild stroke which affected his writing. In 1870, however, he suffered another stroke, a massive one which killed him and finally closed the book on this amazing man's life. He is buried here in Westminster Abbey. His legacy, of course, lives on. He helped to change the way people thought about social injustice and the poor and, of course, children. He changed the way we think about the world we live in, about poverty and exploitation. He even changed the way we think about Christmas. More than that, no other English writer has created a world of characters so distinctively different, funny, absurd or cruel, with strange mannerisms, peculiar speech patterns, and odd features that he caricatured so well. Some people loved him, some people hated him, but no one can ignore the life and works of Charles Dickens, one of the greatest writers of all time.